Welcome everybody. Welcome atheists, agnostics, skeptics, free thinkers, whatever you like to call yourself, you are welcome here. Here at the Seattle Atheist Church, we call ourselves an atheist church because you'll never hear anything supernatural promoted from the podium. The way we do it here is we have talks led by members of the community. We have one such talk today by Sarah on bioethics. Before we get into that though, I'd like to make a few announcements. It's a new month, it's July now, so we have our secular social coming up. It's the third Saturday, is it, of every month? I believe it's on the 15th this month. That's at Browers Cafe in Fremont. And also, if you find this atheist church valuable to you and engaging and all that, please consider contributing. There are three ways to do that. The first is to continue coming and sharing your perspective on the various topics during our post-sermon discussions. Secondly, tell your friends. Not necessarily going all the way towards evangelism, but that can always be fun. But if there's some folks in your life who you think might also enjoy the discussions here, invite them along once in a while. And finally, we do need to pay to rent this space and for our various activities. So if you can, please consider making a financial contribution. We have a cash jar in the back. We can also accept credit. And we have a donate button on our website. Now, just to be clear, if that would be a financial burden for you, don't do that. But if you have some extra money to spare, we can definitely put to use here. So without further preamble, Sarah.
Good morning, everyone. I didn't expect such a big crowd on holiday weekend. But my name's Sarah, and this is my very first talk at Seattle Atheist Church. And I'm also going to try something a little bit different. So here goes. Be gentle, please. So I'm going to talk to you all about bioethics this morning. Why bioethics? As someone who began working in a field that conducts research on human subjects at the ripe old age of 22, way back when, the field has evolved, but bioethical considerations were always on our mind as we worked, as we wrote grant proposals, as we tried to justify any kind of new research ideas or paths, and also as we complied with the responsibilities of our institutional review boards, the IRBs, sometimes very tedious and annoying. So bioethics, like I said, as a student and a researcher, we're all at the bioethical considerations. We're always at the forefront of our mind. So a little bit about bioethics. Like, what is bioethics? The study of ethical issues that arise from any advances in biology and medical research. So these are often controversial things that we see in the news, like cloning and 3-parent babies, all sorts of things like that. And they continually emerge every day almost from new situations and possibilities that are brought on by advances in biological sciences. So the field of bioethics has a really broad scope. So from the philosophy of science to newer territories like biotechnology, neuroethics, and then biotic ethics and astroethics, things that I wasn't really familiar with prior to researching this, but I guess the ethics of life in space. I'm sure there are people here in this room that know much more about the biotic and astroethics background than me, so I'll just leave it there. Bioethics also draws researchers from a variety of academic fields. Law, obviously the biological life sciences basic research, if you will. Philosophy, medicine, public health, medical anthropology, biotechnology, and even politics. And it's really important to note that bioethicists place a really high value on just the simple discussion and presentation of principles. In fact, a handful of universities have bioethics societies, which are similar to like mock trials or moot courts in law school, if you will. So it's a field where there are obviously no clear answers, but we believe there's value in thinking through things in a disciplined fashion with a framework. So a little bit about history. Why are we examining any kind of ethical dilemmas in biomedical research? So I think, unfortunately, a lot of us know the answer to this question, and there's a long history of unethical human experimentation, both here in the US and all over the world. I think we're familiar with the forced sterilizations of genetically inferior human beings leading up to World War II in Germany. And then it's alleged that there were over 400 different experiments ranging in things from hypothermia to or forced hypothermia to forced infection with deadly diseases in the camps in Dachau and Auschwitz. And that led to kind of what we know as the famous doctors' trials, Nuremberg. And also led to the first code of conduct for medical research, which was the Nuremberg Code, written in 1947. So the Nuremberg Code was pretty specific to the Nazi war crimes. So the international community wanted something a little more applicable to other situations. And so that led to the development of the Declaration of Helsinki. And the DOH is important because it's the first significant effort of the medical community to regulate research itself. Wish I could, go on all afternoon about the Declaration of Helsinki. It's undergone 7 revisions and many, many clarifications since the 60s. I think the last one was in 2013. But it's still really widely considered kind of the cornerstone document internationally as a reference for human subjects research, ethics involving human subjects research. So then, I guess Japan also conducted research on human subjects during World War II. Interestingly, post-war, the US actually gave the Japanese pardons, or the Japanese researchers pardons for their activities, with the caveat that they then give the US their research results. So I thought that little exchange was kind of interesting. Other countries like Sweden and the UK, have pretty storied histories as well, as does the US. So we've conducted, as a country, unethical research with human subjects for nearly a century, or all a century, really, including intentional exposure to biological and chemical weapons, injecting people with radioactive or toxic chemicals, deliberately infecting people with pathogens that go on to produce debilitating or dangerous diseases, or deadly diseases in some cases, experiments with radiation, and tests involving mind-altering substances in subjects, and so many other areas. It's pretty shameful history. So the other thing is that they performed, or the US performed a lot of these experiments on kids or on mentally disturbed populations, kind of under the guise of they're getting medical treatment. So just a little kind of extra gross piece of the story. So after World War II, the U.S. found out about all these atrocities, and so amid all this public outcry, of course, there came congressional commissions. There were 5 congressional investigations looking at human or involved with human subjects research, and a fair number of hearings as well. So people were really seeing, what had happened and what kinds of atrocities, really, that the U.S. had perpetrated. So probably the most famous, I guess, of these atrocities that we've probably all heard of are the Tuskegee experiments. For 40 years, from 1932 to 1972, the United States Public Health Service, which is still exists today. They were always the people running around in their little uniforms when I worked at the CDC. But the U.S. Public Health Service, they had a contract with the Tuskegee Institute to conduct a long-term study of syphilis. So they had a sample size of 600 men in this study, 600 African American men. And of this population, of this sample size, 2/3 had died by the end of the 40 years. And only a leak, see, leaks can be good, Donald Trump, thank you. Only a leak led to the study being shut down in 1972, and some pretty severe legal ramifications. And kind of policy recommendations came out of that. So, and then also as just a little aside, I would be remiss not to mention MKUltra, which is the CIA designed illegal program of experiments on humans involving mind control. And I'm only kind of mentioning that as it's something that has come up in previous discussions, or a previous discussion here. So, MKUltra. So driven by the horrors of the Tuskegee Institute, in the late 70s, we created, and bear with me, the National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research. And this was to lay out guidelines and ethical principles for human subjects research in the U.S. And this document is commonly known as the Belmont Report and is on the shelves of everybody I knew. I should have brought my copy. So it's still the kind of go-to document if you're in a government agency or a commission and you're interested in writing a report or a policy recommendation, a white paper. And it also applies to any Department of Health and Human Services agencies, so things like the CDC, the FDA, NIH. So researchers involving, or studies involving human subjects that are conducted or also even just funded by the Department of Health and Human Services are covered in the Belmont Report. So it identified 3 core principles for human subjects research, and we'll be revisiting these throughout the day. So the 3 core principles are autonomy, beneficence, and justice. That's autonomy, beneficence, and justice. And then the Belmont Report also laid out 3 primary areas of application of these principles. Informed consent, which is something we're all familiar with, the selection of research subjects, and also assessments of risks and benefits. And the guidelines were really just to assure that research attempted, or discussions around research attempted to be in accordance with the 3 principles. So the 3 principles influence the 3 guidelines. A little confusing, makes sense. So another quick aside, There's also, besides the Belmont Report, which I'll be focusing on today, there's also another document that the government or governmental agencies refer to quite often, called the Common Rule. The Common Rule, really exciting and inventive name, I know, but formed in the early 90s, it encompasses like 16 or 17 government agencies now, and they basically adopted a set of regulations that would be the same across all, like areas of the government regarding any kind of biomedical or behavioral health research that involves humans. So the Common Rule, it governs IRBs. And so it's still the basis of kind of any ethics of government-funded research in the US. So it expands from just DHHS research to all government-funded research. Like I mentioned, it governs IRBs, and sorry, I lost my place. Nearly all universities, UW, any kind of research university, they hold their IRBs to these same set of standards, and granted it's kind of like the lowest bar, the lowest common denominator. But regardless of the funding, there's still, standards upheld by all universities. And then most recently, in 2001, George Bush established, established a President's Council on Bioethics by executive order. And then I was kind of in the field or peripherally in the field at the time, and a lot of people, and people in writing, critics, kind of suggested that the President's Committee was really only set up to support his positions on abortion and stem cell research. So basically like wrapping political and research kind of agendas, together in the guise of dignity. So, and people think that this might have ended up had serious effects, might have ended up distorting the potential of biomedical research, and even the motivation of some researchers in the US. So the George Bush's, I was going to say W's, but that's not respectful. President Bush's committee was mainly made up of Christian-affiliated neoconservatives, and actually not a single bench scientist was on the committee as well. So then a little bit more recently, President Obama suspended President Bush's committee and replaced the council in 2009 with a commission for the study of bioethical issues. And so a lot of people, for reasons I just or for some of the reasons I just mentioned, were really happy with Obama's decision to scrap and repeal and replace. Sorry, really bad joke. But anyway, just have a fresh start. I also think we used to have a president with the desire to see his policies backed by, expert consensus, if you will, like what's garnered from the commission. So the commission, of course, being an Obama, presidency commission, was made up more of, kind of like-minded liberals, if you will, and bringing novel ethical theories with them, like utilitarianism, wow. Let's think, back then policy derived from evidence-based science, not a novel idea. I think a lot of us in here can agree. So back to the Belmont Report, which I said I'd talk about pretty extensively. Values, they don't give us answers, or these principles don't give us answers about how to handle particular situations, but instead provide a framework, I think I used the word framework before, for understanding conflicts. And the belief that there's value in simply thinking through things in a disciplined fashion, like using a framework. So let's get down to the meat and potatoes. 3 principles of bioethics, pretty simple: autonomy, justice, beneficence. So we'll start with autonomy, or sometimes respect for persons, people say. Autonomy concerns, any research subjects' right to self-determination. So their ability to make any kind of, rational, informed, uninfluenced, decisions. And I say uninfluenced because that's a whole other area with researchers being, truthful and not deceptive, and things like that when, selling or recruiting research participants. So it's important that we respect the choices of autonomous individuals, but also people who are incapable of making their own choices need to be protected as well. So autonomy, I said, principles, basis for the guidelines. So autonomy is the principle that's the basis for the guideline of informed consent. And respect for autonomy also underlies things like advanced directives and medical representatives, medical surrogates. And actually, in recent commentary, a lot of people have said that an increased importance that's being placed on autonomy is really kind of a social response, a social reaction to the paternalism in U.S. healthcare. And I would tend to agree personally. So justice. Justice in the context of bioethics is often described as, or seen in the context of distributive justice. So it's equitable distributions of burdens and benefits of the research. So it includes ensuring reasonable, non-exploitative, well-considered procedures, and very importantly, that they're administered fairly and equally. So study design and study practices are important in the context of justice. So it also has to do, don't exploit vulnerable individuals or populations, and also don't exclude people who might benefit the trial without any kind of good reason. And then just a little aside, in some cases, rarely, and this is kind of a new thing, individuals who are interviewed for the research trial but can't participate for one reason or another, including denying or not agreeing, that they can't be turned away and still have to be given the same standard care as patients. So I think that's a really cool development in some trials and something that maybe we should explore as a justice issue. So thirdly, you have autonomy, justice, and now thirdly, beneficence. And so we ideally want to set up these study protocols to benefit various parties, to benefit individual participants, to benefit the clinical trial itself, or even to benefit society. And we want to do this while we still minimize the risks to research subjects. And then I guess of potential interest to all you techies, more recently, the data and safety monitoring folks that review the continuation of trials have become kind of more and more important elements of beneficence. So tech guys are always helpful. And then I guess to kind of finish things up, some academics really believe or argue that beneficence should be the sole fundamental bioethical principle. In the Belmont Report, and it's kind of typically considered not that one principle is not outweighed by another. However, recently a lot of people are saying, or actually not recently, back to the 70s, with Tom Beauchamp, arguing it should be the fundamental principle when considering bioethical analysis. So, as I mentioned, in addition to the 3 principles, we have the 3 guidelines. The first one being the selection of subjects for your research trial. So ethical recruiting is often an issue of justice. And so it's ensuring, inclusion and adequate representation of, women, of children, of vulnerable populations. And also, designing a study to ensure scientific validity as well as reproducibility. A couple of things that we've touched on in church talks as well. So informed consent is the second guideline, and I guess along with informed consent comes informed refusal. And it's just, and I think I talked about this before, but it's tied or closely tied to the principle of individual autonomy or respect for persons. So consent really needs to be free and fully informed. And that's fully informed based on, objective information and understanding the risks and benefits of any kind of trial or study they're getting into. So there's a lot of elements of informed consent that kind of make those forms we sign 18 pages long. So lastly, the third guideline is assessment of risks and benefits. And that's pretty self-explanatory. We use that kind of technique in a lot of, our fields. The risk-benefit analysis is obviously associated with the principle of beneficence or non-maleficence in clinical settings, which I'll get to in one quick second. We need to understand, or in assessing, risk-benefit analysis, we need to understand that the consent and needs of the patient needs to be, or patient, subject, participant in your trial, needs to be revised kind of over the course of a study or trial. And that's by both the investigators as well as the patients or the participants. And like I mentioned, it's concerned with beneficence. Okay, so I mentioned the term non-maleficence a few seconds ago. So we've talked about bioethics for a few minutes. Did you have something?
Yeah, are we going to have a discussion?
Yes. Did you have a question or a comment?
I just wondered if there's going to be time for it.
Yes, hopefully. Yes.
We'll grab a second now.
Yeah. Okay, we'll make sure it's covered. Okay, so bioethics. How does it differ from medical ethics or clinical ethics? So typically in medical ethics, it's kind of narrowed more to specific professional or ethical situations. And I mentioned the principle of non-maleficence. That's a new one. So what does it mean? Most of us know it as first, do no harm. Very simply, do no harm. And also known as utility, just promoting more good than harm. It's also, just commonly referred to as the fourth principle. Whether I'm assigned a bioethical or a medical ethical, just the fourth principle. And then I guess finally, I'd be reproached to mention that feminist approaches have been more common in the last several decades, and they even have their own journal. And it just, the feminist approach is more inclusive bioethical theory. Doesn't privilege groups with power, takes into consideration power structures, and also viewpoints of women. Women were left out of research in the United States until strikingly recently, which is very unfortunate because a lot of the drugs we take now were tested solely on men, or approved solely on men. But so it takes into account the viewpoints of women and other disadvantaged groups. So I guess here comes the successful, hopefully successful, kind of interactive case study portion. I guess how I envisioned it going is I'm going to tell you a little story, and then hopefully with some prompting, using the 3 principles that I outlined in the Belmont Report, kind of as an ethical framework, we're going to have a discussion about the case. And so I don't know if we want to stay in this seating arrangement, or do we want to do something else? You're good? People are good? Okay. So sit back and let me tell you a little story. TJ is a 7-year-old boy who was diagnosed with asthma at age 3. His asthma is only moderately severe, and it's really well controlled by 2 inhaled medications, or inhalers. Otherwise, TJ is really healthy. He attends school, plays sports. During TJ's regular visit to his primary care doc at the local community health clinic, during that visit, he was approached to be a participant in a clinical study of a new medication for asthma to assess its safety and efficacy in treating children with asthma. The medication is taken once a day as a flavored, chewable tablet. It works by a totally different mechanism than the inhaled medications TJ's currently taking. The experimental drug has not yet been studied in children, but 3 studies have been completed in adult patients with asthma, a total of 500 participants in those 3 studies. The preliminary evidence from the adult studies is that the new experimental drug improves asthma in some patients, and has very few side effects. If TJ participates in this study, he will be on the research protocol for 14 weeks total. Neither TJ and his parents, nor the researchers will know whether TJ's on the placebo or the experimental drug. Blinded, people are familiar with that term. He'll be seen at regular intervals to assess his response to treatment and evaluate any adverse events. This will require him to visit his doctor 6 times, during which a general physical will be performed, breathing tests will be done, and blood drawn to measure the amount of the experimental drug in his body. TJ's family will not be responsible for the costs of any study-related office visits or testing. All their transportation costs will be covered. All of his medications will be provided, his inhalers and the new investigational drug, or placebo, will be provided free of charge. And lastly, TJ will get $40 for each office visit. So $240 if he completes the entire protocol. The details of the study have been explained to TJ and his parents, and they've been asked if they and TJ will agree for him to enroll in the study. If y'all were TJ's parents, what would you do? So, let's first just have a quick kind of very rough scrapple.
I had a question.
Sure.
Answer that. Did I understand correctly that he's still going to use the inhalers? Those are still available?
Yeah, as part of his, as part of the drug trial regimen. I'll talk about that in a second.
I also have a question.
Yeah.
You
So
said
sorry.
some. Were they actually upfront about the proportion of people for whom the drug worked?
That's a question that I would have to say the answer would be yes, because of like requirements. Like, so
Whether or not they were following those requirements was
that's
something
another
I wanted
story.
to know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Richard.
Yeah, during the phase 2 studies with the adults, what happened if somebody had too large of a dose?
You know,
What was the adverse effect?
that's not listed.
Oh.
I do not know. Yeah.
Because
I guess I can make some up for the purpose of okay. So nausea, dizziness, sleepiness, something, mild side effects were, yeah.
Because phase 1 is usually with animals, phase 2
Yeah.
is where they try to determine the doses for adults. Did you go over that? I'm thinking later.
No, this is just completely pretend.
This is all.
Yeah, or not completely. It's from a case I had in school, but really modified and simplified. So a lot of the kind of specific information about the trial or his med schedule, I eliminated. So, Nate.
I was just going to comment, traditionally when you do these cases, you're just given whatever information is given to you,
Yeah.
all you have. So if there was an unknown, you're supposed to make a judgment call. So we could have that.
Sorry. Mickey.
I was just going to ask how dramatic the improvements were for the
All-
people that helped.
All I can say, and all you know, is that, what did I say? It improved asthma symptoms in some patients with very few side effects. Like, can't answer Richard's question, can't answer your question. Yeah.
Do we know if adults, some of the adult cohort in the previous studies were on the same inhalers so that the drug interactions would?
If I didn't say it, we don't know.
So we don't know.
Yeah. And frankly, that's not something that would be in an informed consent talk. Yeah.
Yeah, how about no? There's enough information in any way.
Okay, so that's kind of, let's do just a really quick straw poll. Like, raise your hand if you were TJ's parent and you would not let him enroll in the trial.
Not with this one.
Okay. And so raise your hand if you're TJ's parent and you would definitely enroll him in the trial. Okay. That's really interesting. It's actually the reverse of what I had kind of thought. But not enough information is great. So, okay. You made snap judgments. That's great. But how can we think through this decision, this ethical quandary, this dilemma you're in?
My biggest concern as TJ's parent is that the medication would work very well. He'd be functioning normally, and after 14 weeks, he'd lose it. So the biggest concern I have, because risks are reasonably low, and I believe passionately in our collective obligation to advance science. So I would unhesitatingly subject my child to an experimental treatment that might help them and would certainly advance knowledge. But I cannot imagine what it would be like. I mean, how old is TJ? 7. A 7-year-old. My son is 7. I can't imagine what it would be like to go from struggling for breath and unable to play sports with the other kids to
Except
suddenly
that
being
he
It's well managed.
Yeah,
well managed doesn't mean he's
He plays
symptom-free.
sports.
No, but
Well,
he did
they say he plays
specifically
sports.
state he
Okay,
can play
okay.
sports and do
But
everything
I
other kids
still,
his age can do.
I would still, my big worry as a parent would be if in fact it makes his asthma much better, and then it goes away after 14 weeks and we can't get it back because it's not available on the market. Maybe it never gets approved.
Right.
That's
And so
a
that
big
would
concern
be
for
an
now.
issue of justice.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. So that would be an issue of justice, and a one that would be rightly so, to be concerned about. TJ gets better, and like you said, this med, if it's in phase 2, I think Richard, and I would agree. Trials doesn't get, come to market for 3-4 years down the road. But he had that period of a really great response because he was on the experimental drug and not the placebo. So he had that great time of, not having to deal with inhalers and then going back to it. I understand that. So the issue of justice would be, are we obligated to then provide this, drug to the child, for the duration, or until it gets, like a lot of things would, or a lot of regulatory issues would swim around that, but kind of the issue of obligation to provide.
Did I hear you correctly when you said it's mildly severe?
Moderately severe.
Moderately severe. Okay, well, just the word severe in there says like it's bad enough. There could be an accident at some point. They don't have medication. Maybe life-threatening under the worst circumstances. The negative effects seemed few and far between from how it was stated, and the negative effects were nausea, sleeping, and something like that. And that was with the overdose or something. So it seemed well within. It seemed very fine to put them in. Maybe it was a little bit lowballing on the price, because only $40 even for a child for that. It seemed a little low, but aside from that, if it could help the kid, if it could advance, chances are very minimal that it'll negatively impact the kid. I see no reason not to.
So that sounds like a risk-benefit analysis, a classic risk-benefit analysis, where you're taking that principle of beneficence and thinking of TJ's well-being or potential well-being, as kind of the primary reason. I had a bunch of questions to prompt a discussion, but I guess let's just kind of go with what's happening. Michael, and then I think y'all, I don't know who was next. Oh, and then, I'm sorry, it was you two. Michael?
Yes.
Yes.
I just had a criticism of the research strategy. In the original research on the adults, they found that some responded and some didn't. I would think that rather than go and try to jump up to see if it applies to the children, the next step should be to find out what makes the difference between the adults who respond and the adults who don't. In other words, the idea would be a series of small group designs to zero in on that variance and reduce it, so that you can, and then once you know more about exactly why it works or doesn't work, then you can worry about expanding it to other populations. Like children.
Yeah, I guess just a note on that, to kind of proceed with this type of thing, even phase 1 trials really, is you have to have a mechanism of biologic plausibility, before somebody's going to shell out millions of dollars for you to do anything. So I would have been prior to, an actual clinical trial with people, studies done in the kind of bench science, basic type areas that would have informed the biologic plausibility of a link between the two. And so, yes, I agree with you, but it's a little more nuanced than that.
Yeah, I would be more, I think you get further if you zero in on reducing the variance than you would by these advanced large statistical trials that don't produce clear results.
So would you consider that kind of an issue of beneficence, like the benefits of the clinical trial or the benefits to society at large couldn't be fulfilled, or maybe an issue of justice? With not having the funding to do things like that,
It's an issue of what produces reliable results.
Okay, so study design.
Yeah.
I think that would encompass, a wide variety of kind of ethical principles. What you're suggesting.
In other words, if it's not reliable, how can it be beneficial?
Exactly. And that's, I think I mentioned, one of the guidelines is selection of subjects. And that includes issues to be able to make that surround being able to make the study reliable and reproducible, and other things that, the Bradford Hill criteria, basically, I'm sure you know. But so I'm going to actually move on, and then maybe we can talk about this later. I think you're next.
So let's assume this young boy takes the study and he improved in 14 weeks, and it turns out he's taking placebo, then what?
Yeah, then what? The placebo effect, you know. That's it.
That work.
I'm sorry.
Is there a placebo effect for asthma?
Yeah.
Placebo effect for everything.
And, you know, I think one could argue there is a placebo effect for everything. That was going to be my response. You know, that's all I have to say, placebo effect. I mean, he would obviously be counted in the study and would be a valuable, I don't want to say piece of data because humans aren't pieces of data, but would be a valuable participant. So I don't know which one of y'all was first. Okay.
So my big concern going into this as a parent would be a combination of lack of visibility from how much information they gave us about the study and how much had been done prior to that, because a lot of what they said seemed like it was painting that in the most positive possible light without giving a lot of information about drug interactions and longevity of studies. And I just would want a lot more information before consenting to my child having additional drugs added to their system. And there's also the fact that no one's really talked about talking to the kid about it. And I think it's very important to not allow the kid to make that decision, but to sit down with them and have the conversation about medical advancements and informed consent, because he is the one that's going to be doing the actual study and having it done on him. And he can't give informed consent if he doesn't have it produced at his level and explained in terms of context.
Yes, I would completely agree. I guess as an aside, the very latest version of the Declaration of Helsinki did include a pretty cool section, or I think a pretty cool section on, you know, seeking the consent of minors where possible. That's so good. And I had some questions, I guess, prepared, like, you know, he can't legally consent. So, you know, what rights does the parent have?